Get your hands off my desk before I call security. Richard Sloane says it loud enough for the whole 17th floor to hear, and Marcus Bell freezes with a screwdriver still in his hand. 3 weeks later, the same man who said those words is standing in a courtroom hallway with his tie loosened and his hands shaking, waiting to hear a judge decide what happens to the rest of his life. But Marcus Bell doesn't know that yet. Right now, he only knows that his daughter needs new shoes by Friday, that his checking account has $214.60 in it, and that the woman running the fourth largest technology company in Atlanta just asked him a question no one has asked him in 3 years. Drop the city you're watching from in comments. I want to see how far this one travels, and if today has been heavy, hit subscribe, because this story was made for people like you. Marcus Bell is 39 years old. He has a scar above his left eyebrow from a car accident on Interstate 285 that took his wife, Renee Bell, on a Tuesday afternoon in March 3 years and 4 months ago. He still has not gotten used to March. He works as a senior systems technician for Vance Dynamics, a technology firm headquartered in a 41-story glass tower on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia. His badge says Level 2 Support. His paycheck says $21.40 an hour. His daughter, Zoe Bell, is 9 years old, has her mother's exact laugh, and has slept with the hallway light on every night since the accident, because darkness, she told him once, is when you remember things you didn't ask to remember. He raises her alone. There was never a custody fight, never a second parent to argue with, because there is no one else. Renee Bell died on impact. The other driver walked away with a citation and a lawyer. Marcus buried his wife on a Thursday in April and was back at his desk fixing a payroll server the following Monday, because Vance Dynamics did not offer bereavement leave beyond 5 days. And 5 days was what he took, because $21.40 an hour times 40 hours was the only thing standing between his daughter and losing the apartment on Del Mar Lane. There is also the matter of $31,600 in unpaid emergency room and surgical bills from the night of the accident, bills that arrive every month in a white envelope Marcus has learned to open standing up because sitting down to read them feels like giving them too much of his attention. Zoe was 6 when it happened, and for the first year afterward she asked almost every night at dinner whether her mother could see her from wherever she was, and Marcus always said yes, because some truths matter less than the ones a child needs to survive a Tuesday. Now, 3 years later, she has stopped asking the question out loud, but she still sets the table for 3 every Sunday without being told, and Marcus has never once corrected her. His dream is small and specific. He wants to buy a house before Zoe turns 12, something with a yard, something that is not a 2-bedroom rental with a landlord who raises rent every March like it's scheduled around his wife's death. He has $6,200 saved in a manila envelope inside a shoebox inside his closet. He needs $9,000 for a reasonable down payment in the neighborhoods he's looked at. He is $2,800 away from a future he has been building one overtime shift at a time, one Saturday call-out at a time, one skipped lunch at a time. Elena Vance is 42 years old. She built Vance Dynamics from a rented garage in Marietta into a company valued at $3.7 billion, and she did it after her husband, Thomas Vance, left her 11 years ago for a woman half her age, taking with him nothing but his signature and the particular kind of silence that follows a person around a house for months afterward. Elena does not talk about the marriage. She talks about quarterly earnings, about server migrations, about the 12-person executive team that reports to her on the 40th floor. She has not laughed, really laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere lower than the throat, in longer than she can remember. And she has stopped noticing the absence of it, the way a person stops noticing a low, constant hum after enough years of living beside it. Richard Sloane enters Marcus Bell's life on a Tuesday morning at 9:14 a.m. in the elevator bank of the Vance Dynamics Tower, 3 days before Elena Vance's computer crashes during a board presentation. Sloane is 47, 6'2", and has been Chief Operating Officer of Vance Dynamics for 6 years. He has also for 6 years been quietly, patiently, and increasingly desperately in love with Elena Vance, a fact that Elena has never once acknowledged and Richard has never once said out loud, because saying it out loud would mean risking a no he isn't prepared to hear. He has told himself for 6 years that proximity is a kind of claim. That being the man who is always in the room, always available, always one step behind her chair, will eventually be enough. It has never once occurred to him that Elena Vance does not experience his presence as devotion. She experiences it as furniture. That Tuesday morning, Sloane steps into the elevator, sees Marcus holding a toolbox and a badge that reads support, and says nothing at all. He simply looks at Marcus the way a man looks at a coffee stain on a white shirt. Marcus notices. He always notices. He has spent his whole professional life being looked at that way and has learned not to let his face answer back. 3 days later, Elena Vance's primary workstation crashes 11 minutes before she is scheduled to present the third quarter numbers to a room of investors who collectively control $400 million. Her IT director, panicking, sends the nearest available technician, which happens to be Marcus Bell, up from the 17th floor to the 40th. Marcus has been at Vance Dynamics for 7 years. He has never once been above the 20th floor. The elevator to the 40th floor is silent in a way that Marcus's floor never is. No printers, no phones ringing, no one arguing about a shared calendar, just carpet the color of wet concrete and a single assistant at a desk, a woman named Denise Coleman, who looks at Marcus's toolbox and his lanyard and says, "You have 4 minutes before she's back from the boardroom. Whatever's wrong, fix it fast." Marcus sits down at the machine, sees a memory allocation error he's seen twice before on high-load systems, and clears it in under 3 minutes. While he's rebooting the second monitor, he notices something he wasn't looking for. A photograph, set as the desktop background, of a woman standing at the edge of a lake at dusk, barefoot, laughing with her whole body, hair loose in a wind that clearly caught her by surprise. It takes him a second to realize the woman is Elena Vance. He has seen her photograph in the company newsletter exactly twice. She has never once looked like that in either picture. He is still looking at it when Elena Vance walks back into her own office and catches him doing it. "Is it fixed?" she says. Her voice is flat, professional, already moving on to the next crisis before this one has finished. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus says. "Memory error. It's running clean now." She glances at her monitor, sees the photograph he was looking at, and something in her face shifts, quick and guarded, like a door closing before you can see what's on the other side of it. "That's not company-approved background material," she says, which is a strange thing to say. And they both know it's a strange thing to say. "I wasn't going to report it," Marcus says. Elena Vance looks at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she asks, "Do you think I'm pretty?" Not beautiful, not attractive. Pretty, the word a person uses when they already know what the mirror says and want to know if a stranger sees something the mirror doesn't. Marcus Bell has learned 2 things in 39 years of living: answer too fast and you're lying to be kind, and take too long, and the person can feel you doing math. So he takes exactly the time it takes to mean it. "The woman in that photograph is one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen," he says, "but that's not a picture of a CEO, that's a picture of somebody who forgot for 1 second to be anybody except herself. I don't know when you stopped letting yourself be her, but I know the difference between the two." For 3 full seconds nobody speaks. The only sound is the air conditioning vent above the window. "That's an unusually honest answer for someone in a toolbox," Elena Vance finally says. "You asked an honest question," Marcus says, and picks up his tools, and leaves, and does not think about it on the elevator down. He thinks about it on the elevator down. He thinks about it for the rest of the week. What Marcus does not know, standing in that elevator with his toolbox and his 214.60, is that Richard Sloane was in the hallway outside Elena's office for the last 90 seconds of that conversation, and that Richard Sloane heard every word of it through a door that had not fully latched, and that something in his chest, hearing another man say the word beautiful about Elena Vance, curled itself into a fist and did not open back up for a long time. The second visit happens 11 days later, when Elena's assistant emails IT scheduling directly requesting Marcus Bell by name for a routine hardware check. Richard Sloane finds out about the request within the hour, because Richard Sloane has made it his business quietly and for 6 years, to know everything that happens on Elena Vance's calendar. He does not say anything to Elena. He goes down to the 17th floor instead. He finds Marcus in the break room at 12:40 p.m., eating a sandwich his daughter made him that morning with an amount of mustard that could reasonably be classified as a safety hazard. Sloane sits down across from him uninvited. "You fixed Miss Vance's computer," Sloane says. "It isn't a question. That's my job," Marcus says. "Your job is on the 17th floor," Sloane says. "I'd hate for you to forget where that is." He stands up before Marcus can answer, straightens his jacket and walks out, and Marcus sits there with his sandwich and understands, with the particular clarity that comes from 20 years of being underestimated by men in good suits, that he has just been threatened by someone with a corner office, and that the threat had nothing to do with company policy. That same evening, Richard Sloane does something he has never once, in 6 years, allowed himself to do. He stops by Elena Vance's office unannounced at 6:50 p.m., after most of the 40th floor has emptied out, and he tells her, in a voice that shakes slightly at the edges, that he has always admired her, that he thinks the two of them could build something together beyond the company, that he has been waiting for the right moment for a long time. Elena listens to the entire speech with her hands folded on her desk, and when he finishes, she says, gently but without a single opening left in it, "Richard, I value you as an executive. I have never, not once, thought of you the way you're describing. I'm sorry if I let that go unclear for too long." Richard Sloane nods, says something professional and hollow about respecting her honesty, and leaves the office with his ears burning, and by the time he reaches the elevator he has already decided, though he would never phrase it to himself this plainly, that if he cannot have what he wants, no one else is going to be allowed to have it either. The conversations between Marcus and Elena continue anyway, every 10 or 11 days, always framed as system maintenance, always 30 minutes that stretch into 50. Elena Vance tells him, on the third visit, about her brother, dead 9 years now, a boating accident off Tybee Island, that she still can't discuss without her voice flattening into something professional and far away. Marcus tells her, on the fourth visit, about the night Zoe spiked a fever of 104 degrees, and he drove to the emergency room alone at 2 a.m., with a 9-month-old strapped into a car seat, singing to her, because singing was the only thing keeping his own hands steady on the wheel. On the fifth visit, something shifts in the room in a way neither of them names out loud. Elena is standing at the window when he arrives, and she doesn't turn around right away. And when she finally does, she says, "I had a dream about the lake last night, the one in the photograph. I haven't thought about that lake in 4 years." Marcus sets down his tools without opening them. "Tell me about it," he says. And she does, for 20 straight minutes, about her brother teaching her to swim there when she was 7, about the smell of pine and gasoline from the boat motor, about the specific gold color the water turns 40 minutes before the sun goes down. At one point, her voice catches, just slightly, on the word "gone," and Marcus, without entirely deciding to, reaches across the desk and rests his hand over hers for exactly 4 seconds. Neither of them moves. Neither of them mentions it afterward, but something has been said in those 4 seconds that neither of them could have said out loud, and both of them know it. "You have a daughter who sounds extraordinary," Elena says later that visit, once her voice has steadied. "She wants to build bridges now," Marcus says. "Last month it was marine biology. The month before that she wanted to be a judge because," and I'm quoting her directly, "judges get to tell people the truth for a living, and nobody's allowed to interrupt them." Elena laughs. It is short, surprised out of her, and it is the same laugh from the photograph, and Marcus notices and does not say so, though something in his chest tightens pleasantly at having caused it. "I'd like to meet her," Elena says, before she can decide whether it's an appropriate thing to say. Zoe, I'd like to meet Zoe, if that's something you'd ever consider." Marcus is quiet for a second. "She has a half day next Wednesday," he says. "I could bring her by. Fair warning, she asks whatever question she wants, in whatever order it occurs to her. I've stopped trying to prepare people." Zoe arrives that Wednesday in her best green jacket, a size too big because Marcus bought it for her to grow into, with 2 braids her grandmother helped her pin the night before. She walks into the 40th floor office, looks around once with the collector's eyes she uses in museums, and then looks directly at Elena Vance. "You're her," Zoe says. "I am," Elena says. "And you must be Zoe." "I am," Zoe says. "My dad thinks about you. You can tell because he goes quiet in a specific way. His regular quiet is different." Marcus says her name in a warning tone she completely ignores. "Do you have any pets?" Zoe asks. "No," Elena says carefully. "I travel too much." "That's a reasonable reason," Zoe says. "I want a dog, but we're in an apartment, so I understand about constraints." She pauses. "My dad says you have a really good computer. He fixed it." "He did," Elena says, something happening at the corner of her mouth that is trying very hard not to become a full smile. "He's good at that," Zoe says. "He fixes things. He figures out the actual problem, instead of just the surface one." She turns back to Elena with the focused attention of someone who came here for a reason and is getting to it. "He said you were important, and that I'd find you interesting. Was he right?" Elena Vance, who has in the past decade negotiated with venture capitalists and testified before a state regulatory panel, looks at a 9-year-old girl in a green jacket and says with complete sincerity, "I don't know yet. I think that depends on you." Zoe smiles. "The real one, the one that goes all the way up." "That's a good answer," she says. "Most adults just say yes." For the next 40 minutes, Zoe Bell conducts what can only be described as the most effective interview Marcus has ever witnessed, conducted by someone who does not know she is conducting one. She asks Elena what she built first. Elena tells her about a small inventory tool she and her brother coded one summer in a garage that had no air conditioning. Zoe asks if the garage was hot. Elena says extremely. Zoe tells her about the summer she and her dad tried to build a bookshelf in their apartment hallway, and it was too hot to finish, so they left it half-built for 2 weeks, and Marcus kept walking into it in the dark. Elena laughs again, a real one, at the image of a grown man walking into a half-built bookshelf. On the drive home, Zoe is quiet for a while, and then she says, "She's lonely, Daddy, not the kind where you don't have people around, the kind where you have people around and doesn't help." Marcus keeps his eyes on the road. "I know," he says. "Are you going to fix it?" Zoe asks. "I don't think loneliness works like a computer," Marcus says. "You can't just find the corrupted file and run a recovery." "No," Zoe agrees. "But you can sit with someone while they figure out their own recovery. You're good at that." She looks at him. "She looks at you the same way you look at her." Marcus doesn't answer that, but it sits in the car with him the rest of the way home, and for 3 days afterward, he thinks about almost nothing else. Richard Sloane notices too. He is taken to walking past Elena's office more often than his own responsibilities require, and on the 6th visit, he sees Marcus Bell leave her office at 2:52 p.m., with the particular unhurried ease of a man who has stopped being nervous in a room, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, laughing at something over his shoulder as the door closes behind him, and something in Sloane's chest goes cold and then hot, in a way he does not examine too closely, because examining it would mean admitting what it is. He stands in the hallway for a full minute after the elevator doors close, breathing through his nose, and by the time he walks back to his own office, the plan has already started assembling itself behind his eyes, piece by careful piece, the way a man plans something he has convinced himself is justice instead of what it actually is. What Richard Sloane does not see, because he has already turned and walked away by then, is what happens 40 seconds earlier, back inside the office he just passed. Elena is standing near the window, and Marcus has stopped gathering his tools mid-motion, and neither of them is in a hurry to end the conversation the way they usually pretend to be by 2:52 p.m. "I keep thinking about the lake," Elena says, not looking at him directly. "I keep thinking about the fact that you're the only person who's asked me about it in 4 years. Marcus sets his bag down again. "Maybe you should go back," he says. "To the lake." "Maybe," she says, and turns to face him fully, close enough now that he can see the exact place where her composure gives way to something else, something unguarded and a little frightened of itself. "Would you come with me if I asked?" The question sits in the room the way her first question sat in the room months ago, weighted with more than its own words. Yes, Marcus says, without hesitation this time. Because some answers don't need 3 seconds anymore. For a moment neither of them moves. The city hums 40 floors below the window, indifferent as always. And Elena's hand comes up, slowly, and rests against the side of his face. And Marcus covers it with his own. And they stand like that, foreheads nearly touching, breath shared in the small space between them, until Denise Coleman's voice crackles softly through the office intercom, announcing a call Elena has to take. And the moment folds itself carefully away, unfinished, waiting for the next Wednesday to come back for it. That night, Richard Sloane calls a man named David Kessler, a financial journalist he has fed information to twice before in his career, both times to damage a rival executive without his own name ever surfacing. I think there's a story here, Sloane tells him. IT support staff getting unusual access to executive systems. Might be nothing. Might be something Vance Dynamics shareholders would want to know about before the Q4 earnings call. He does not mention Elena's name. He does not need to. Kessler is good at his job. 3 days later, David Kessler calls Marcus's personal cell phone at 1:15 p.m. while Marcus is eating lunch in his car in the parking deck. Mr. Bell? I'm working on a piece about internal culture at Vance Dynamics, Kessler says, smooth as poured concrete. I'd hate for a story to run without your side of things. Marcus recognizes the sentence for what it is, a threat wearing the clothes of a courtesy, and hangs up, and reports the call to Denise Coleman within the hour, marked urgent. Elena responds herself within 4 minutes from a personal email address he's never seen before. Don't speak to him again. I'll handle it. Then, a minute later, a second message. Are you okay? Marcus writes back that he's fine, that Kessler got nothing. She writes back that she knows, that's why she's asking about him and not the information. It is the first time in 3 years that anyone outside his daughter has asked him that question. And meant it, and he sits in his car in the parking deck for 4 full minutes before he can make himself drive home. The humiliations that follow are not accidents. They are engineered, one at a time, each one heavier than the last. And Richard Sloane builds them the way he built his career, patiently, deniably, always with someone else's fingerprints visible, and his own nowhere in the room. The first happens at Zoe's school. Westbrook Elementary holds an annual fall fundraiser gala, tickets $85 a plate, and Marcus buys 1 ticket because 1 is what 85 allows, and he takes Zoe in the same navy blazer he wore to Renee's funeral, because it is the only blazer he owns. A woman named Carol Reyes, whose husband happens to sit on the board of a venture fund that Richard Sloane golfs with twice a month, corners Marcus near the silent auction table and says loudly enough for 3 other parents to hear, I didn't realize the school let just anyone attend these things now. Zoe hears it. Zoe does not say anything the whole ride home, and that silence is worse than any tantrum Marcus has ever had to manage, because Zoe Bell has never in her life gone quiet without a reason, and the reason this time is that she is 9 years old, and she has just learned what her father has known for a long time. The second happens the following weekend, at a restaurant on Highland Avenue where Marcus has taken Zoe for her 9th birthday dinner, a reservation he saved for 2 months to afford, $64 for the 2 of them including tip. Halfway through dessert, Richard Sloane walks in with Elena Vance on his arm, a dinner she agreed to only because he framed it, insistently and repeatedly, as a necessary discussion about the Q4 budget, and the 2 parties end up seated 4 tables apart in a restaurant Sloane chose specifically because he knew, from Elena's calendar, that it was near Zoe's school. Sloane sees Marcus first. He raises his voice just enough, ordering an $85 bottle of wine, to say, I suppose everyone deserves a treat now and then, even on a support technician's salary, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, loud enough for Zoe to look up from her cake, with her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Elena's face goes rigid with fury. She is too controlled to show fully in public, and she says something sharp to Sloane under her breath that Marcus cannot hear. But Zoe's 9th birthday dinner is already ruined, and Marcus pays the check, takes his daughter's hand, and walks out without looking at either table again, jaw tight the entire drive home. In the car, Zoe stares out the window for 3 full blocks before she says quietly, "I still had a good birthday, Daddy. That part didn't get to be his." Marcus reaches over and squeezes her hand once, hard, because he cannot, at that moment, trust his own voice to answer her out loud. The third happens at Vance Dynamics itself. On a Thursday at 4:47 p.m., Marcus is called into a conference room on the 17th floor by Dale Harmon, his supervisor of 6 years, a tired, decent man who has clearly been handed a script he does not want to read from. "There's an internal report," Dale says carefully. "Someone's alleging that a proprietary prototype device from the R&D wing went missing after your last visit to the executive floor, and that you may have had unsupervised access to the room where it was stored." Marcus's chest goes tight. "I didn't take anything," he says. "I know," Dale says, and Marcus believes him. But belief doesn't stop what comes next. His badge access to floors above the 20th is suspended pending investigation. Case number IR4471, effective immediately. The fourth happens 2 days later, when Marcus applies for a mortgage pre-approval at First Meridian Bank on Ponce de Leon Avenue with his $6,200 down payment and 7 years of pay stubs in a manila folder. The loan officer, a man named Grant Whitfield, looks over the paperwork for 90 seconds and says, "Your debt-to-income ratio is concerning, Mr. Bell. Have you considered renting might simply be more realistic for someone in your position?" Marcus's credit score is 712. His debt-to-income ratio is 31%, well within approval range. Grant Whitfield does not check either number before he says it, because Grant Whitfield has already decided, the moment Marcus walked in wearing work boots instead of a suit, what kind of applicant he is looking at. The fifth happens 2 days after that, at 6:43 p.m., when Marcus is walking Zoe out of the Vance Dynamics lobby after picking her up from the after-school program the company runs for employee families. 2 security guards, acting on a call placed 11 minutes earlier by Richard Sloan claiming he'd witnessed Marcus loitering with company property near a restricted area, stop him at the revolving doors and ask him to open his bag in front of his own daughter. There is nothing in the bag but a thermos and Zoe's math homework. Zoe stands there watching a security guard search her father's belongings in the lobby of the building where he has worked for 7 years, and she does not cry, but her hand finds his and does not let go for the rest of the walk to the car. In the passenger seat, buckling her seatbelt with shaking fingers, she says quietly, "That wasn't fair, Daddy," and Marcus says, "No, baby, it wasn't." And neither of them says anything else the whole drive home. The sixth happens 4 nights later, at 9:52 p.m., when 2 Atlanta police officers knock on the door of the apartment on Del Mar Lane, responding to an anonymous tip phoned into the non-emergency line claiming a possible domestic disturbance and an unsecured firearm inside the unit. There is no firearm inside the unit. There has never been a firearm inside the unit. Marcus opens the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt to find 2 officers with flashlights asking to do a welfare check, while Zoe stands in the hallway behind him in her pajamas, clutching the door frame, her eyes wide in the porch light. The officers are professional, even apologetic once they see the apartment is calm, and the only sound inside is a television playing a cooking show at low volume, but they still walk through every room with a flashlight, while a 9-year-old girl watches strangers search her bedroom closet, and by the time they leave apologizing for the inconvenience, Zoe has stopped saying anything at all. She climbs into Marcus's bed that night instead of her own, something she hasn't done since she was 6, and Marcus lies awake until nearly 1 a.m., with his daughter's small hand fisted into the collar of his shirt, doing math in his head about exactly how far someone was willing to go to make him disappear from a floor he'd only ever wanted to fix a computer on. The call, traced weeks later through the department's own internal log request filed by Angela Brooks, originated from a prepaid phone purchased in cash at a drugstore 2 blocks from Vance Dynamics headquarters. On the same afternoon, Richard Sloan's assistant recalled him leaving the building unexpectedly for what he described only as a personal errand. That night, sitting at the kitchen table long after Zoe has gone to bed with the hallway light on, Marcus opens his laptop and starts pulling every service ticket, every timestamp, every access log from the last 4 months. He does not know yet who is doing this to him. He only knows that a man with a perfect record is a man who cannot be easily erased, and Marcus Bell has spent 7 years building a record with no cracks in it, because he learned a long time ago that the best protection an invisible man has is paperwork nobody can argue with. What he does not know is that a security camera in the 40th floor server room, the same one that logs badge swipes by timestamp, captured Richard Sloane entering that room alone at 7:52 p.m. on the night the prototype disappeared, 40 minutes after every other employee, including Marcus, had already badged out of the building for the day. What he also does not know is that Elena Vance's general counsel, a sharp, quiet woman named Angela Brooks, has been watching Richard Sloane's behavior for 3 weeks with growing unease, ever since she noticed his name attached to 2 anonymous internal complaints filed against Marcus Bell within 9 minutes of each other, a coincidence too clean to be a coincidence. And he does not know that his daughter, sitting on the school bus 2 days after the lobby incident, overhears a woman on a phone call in the seat behind her say the words, "If Bell doesn't back off from the 40th floor," Sloane says there's a lot more where that came from, and that Zoe Bell, who forgets nothing and repeats everything, writes the sentence down in her homework notebook under a doodle of a bridge, because Zoe has decided, in her 9-year-old certainty, that someone needs to remember exactly what was said. Elena Vance finds out about the badge suspension on a Friday morning, not from Human Resources, but from Denise Coleman, who mentions it in passing while confirming Elena's afternoon schedule. Elena is quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she asks Denise to pull the case file IR4471 and to get Angela Brooks into her office within the hour. "I want every log from the 40th floor server room going back 6 months, Elena tells Angela Brooks. Every badge swipe, every camera timestamp, cross-referenced against who filed the internal complaints and when. "You think this is Richard," Angela says. "It isn't really a question. I think," Elena says, and her voice has gone very still, the way it goes right before she makes a decision she's known was coming for a while, "that I have spent 6 years not looking too closely at Richard Sloane, and I am done not looking. I should have ended it the night he came into my office and told me what he wanted from me. I told myself it was just an awkward conversation. It wasn't. It was the first crack, and I let it sit there instead of fixing it, and now it's this." The investigation takes 9 days. 9 days during which Marcus Bell shows up to work at the same time he always has, sits at the same desk, eats lunch alone in his car because the break room now feels like a place where people are waiting to see which version of the story turns out to be true. 9 days during which he does not reach out to Elena Vance first, because a text from her personal number sits in his phone that reads simply, "I'm handling this. Please trust me," and Marcus writes back only, "I trust you, but I'm building my own case too. I'm not going to just wait to be rescued." 9 days during which Zoe Bell hands her homework notebook to her father one evening, opens it to a page with a doodled bridge and a single line of handwriting underneath, and says, "I think this is important, Daddy." A lady on the bus said a name, Sloane. Before he photographs it, he sits down across from her at the kitchen table, where she has spread out a fractions worksheet she insists on finishing before bed, even though it isn't due until Thursday. "Are you scared, Daddy?" she asks, not looking up from 7/8 minus 3/8. "Some," he admits, because Zoe has never once tolerated the polite lie. "Are you going to fight it or just let it go away on its own?" she says. "I don't know yet," he says. "What would you tell me to do?" She sets her pencil down and gives him the full beam of her attention. "Document everything," she says, echoing words he has said to her more than once about her own small injustices at school. "Tell the truth, and don't let someone else's bad behavior turn you into a person you're not." She picks the pencil back up. "Now you do that, and I'm going to finish my fractions, because 4/8 and 1/2 are the same thing and I want to get there before 9 o'clock. Marcus stares at the page for a long moment. Then he photographs it and forwards it, without a word of commentary, to Angela Brooks. Angela Brooks receives the photograph at 8:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. 11 minutes later, she pulls the 40th floor server room access logs, one more time, cross-references them against Richard Sloane's calendar, and finds the entry that changes everything, a badge swipe time-stamped 7:52 p.m. on October the 9th. The exact night the prototype vanished, logged under Richard Sloane's own credentials, 31 minutes after the last other employee, Marcus Bell, had badged out of the building entirely. She calls Elena Vance immediately at 8:31 p.m., interrupting Elena mid-sentence in an otherwise unrelated call about the Q1 budget. "It's him," she says. "It's been him the whole time. Are you certain?" Elena says. "Not a question either. I have the footage," Angela says. "I have the phone records to Kessler. I have the anonymous complaint traced to a terminal his assistant had access to during the exact hour he was in her office alone. It's airtight, Elena. I'd stake the firm's reputation on it." Elena is quiet on the line for a long moment. When she finally speaks, her voice has a hardness in it that Angela has heard exactly twice before in 11 years of working for her, both times right before Elena Vance dismantled something that deserved dismantling. "Set the board meeting for Monday," Elena says. "10 a.m., room 4001. I want Richard there. I want Marcus there. And Angela, I want you to bring the folder. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. on the 40th floor, room 4001, the same conference room where Elena's computer crashed the day this all began." Marcus Bell is asked to attend, though no one tells him why, only that his presence is required, case number IR4471, and he spends the whole weekend certain he is about to be fired, certain the walls he built out of documentation are about to fail him anyway, because that is what walls built by people like him have always done in rooms built by people like Richard Sloane. He arrives at 9:58 a.m. wearing the navy blazer from the fundraiser and the funeral. Zoe insisted on straightening his collar before he left the apartment. "Now you look like someone who already fixed the problem," she told him. "That's better than looking like someone still trying to fix it." Richard Sloane is already seated at the head of the conference table when Marcus walks in, flanked by two members of the board he has cultivated for 6 years, wearing the composed, faintly bored expression of a man who believes he has already won. Elena Vance sits across from him. Angela Brooks sits beside her, a slim black folder resting on the table in front of her, untouched, waiting. "Mr. Bell," Elena says, gesturing to an empty chair, "sit down. This concerns you directly, and you deserve to hear it firsthand, not secondhand from a memo." Richard Sloane's jaw tightens, almost imperceptibly, but Marcus sees it. He has spent 7 years learning to read the small movements of powerful men. Angela Brooks opens the folder. On October the 9th, she says, at 7:52 p.m., someone accessed the 40th floor secure server room using a personal badge credential, 31 minutes after the last employee with authorized visitor access to that floor had already left the building. She slides a printed page across the table. That credential belonged to Richard Sloane. For 3 full seconds, nobody speaks. "That's absurd," Sloane says, but his voice has lost its floor. Angela Brooks opens a laptop, turns it to face the table, and presses play. Grainy security footage, time-stamped in the corner, shows Richard Sloane alone in the server room, removing a case from a locked cabinet, tucking it under his arm, and leaving. The room is completely silent except for the low hum of the projector fan. "The internal complaint against Mr. Bell," Angela continues, "was filed 9 minutes after this footage was recorded, from an anonymous internal terminal that was later traced, through IP logs, to a workstation registered to your executive assistant, whom you had access to at that hour." She pauses. "We also traced 2 calls placed from your office line to a journalist named David Kessler, one of which occurred 3 days before Mr. Kessler contacted Mr. Bell, directly attempting to solicit a damaging quote." Richard Sloane's hands are flat on the table. They have started, very slightly, to shake. Sweat has broken along his hairline, and his face has gone the specific gray color of a man watching every version of himself he has ever presented to a room collapse at once. Outside the conference room door, Denise Coleman, who has spent 6 years fetching coffee and rescheduling calls for this exact man, stands with a stack of files pressed to her chest and does not move, does not breathe, waiting to hear whether the floor she works on is about to change shape entirely. This is a misunderstanding, he says. I can explain the context. Then explain the restaurant on Highland Avenue, Elena says quietly, and it is the first time her voice has risen at all. Explain why you chose that restaurant, Richard. Explain why you ordered the wine loudly enough for a 9-year-old girl to hear you insult her father on her birthday. There is no context that explains that. There is only cruelty, and you have been mistaking it for cleverness for a very long time. Richard Sloane says nothing. The silence stretches long enough that the air conditioning becomes audible again, the way it was in this same room the day Marcus first fixed Elena's computer. You have 12 hours, Elena Vance says, and her voice does not rise again, which somehow makes it land harder than shouting would have. 12 hours to resign in writing, return the prototype, and sign a full non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement drafted by Miss Brooks this morning. If those 12 hours pass without your signature, this board will authorize a criminal referral to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for corporate theft and workplace retaliation, and I will personally ensure every detail of this footage becomes part of the public record. Richard Sloane's face has drained of every bit of its remaining color. He looks, for the first time in 6 years, exactly as small as the things he has done. He does not say anything else. He stands, and his chair scrapes loudly against the floor in the silence, and he walks out of room 4001 without looking at anyone, and that is the last time Marcus Bell ever sees him in that building. The fallout moves fast after that. By Wednesday, Richard Sloane has resigned, effective immediately, and the resignation is accompanied by a signed statement acknowledging the theft and the retaliatory complaints obtained by Angela Brooks as a condition of avoiding immediate arrest. Marcus's badge access is restored within the hour, backdated, with a formal written apology from Human Resources placed in his file, alongside a note that his personnel record shows 7 years of exemplary performance and 1 closed investigation, fully resolved in his favor. Grant Whitfield, the loan officer, is a smaller story, but it does not go unnoticed. Elena Vance, without ever mentioning Marcus's name, moves Vance Dynamics' considerable corporate banking relationship away from First Meridian Bank within the month, citing, in a letter to their regional president, concerns about lending practices and customer treatment standards. 3 weeks later, Marcus receives a call from a different bank entirely, Coastal Trust Federal, offering a pre-approval at a rate 2 points below market. No explanation given, though Marcus suspects one anyway. David Kessler's story never runs. His editor kills it after Angela Brooks sends a legal letter documenting the sourcing, and Kessler, to his credit, later sends Marcus a brief, awkward apology by email that Marcus reads once and does not answer. Because some doors don't need to be reopened just because someone finally knocked politely. That Wednesday evening, after everything settles, Elena calls Marcus and asks him to come up to the 40th floor one more time, not for a system check, just to talk. It is raining outside, the kind of steady Atlanta rain that turns the whole city the color of pewter, and when Marcus arrives, Elena is standing at the window again, watching it, and she doesn't turn around right away. I should have ended it with Richard the very first time he crossed a line, she says. I let it sit there for years because I told myself it was easier to manage him than to confront him. I am done doing that with anything in my life. I want you to know that. I know, Marcus says. She turns around. The rain is streaking the glass behind her, catching the last gray light of the afternoon, and she looks at him the way she looked in the photograph, unguarded, present, entirely herself. Are you happy? She asks him. Right now. Not in general. Right now. Marcus thinks about the answer for exactly as long as it takes to mean it. Yes, he says, I am. There's something I want to ask you, Elena says, and her tone shifts. Careful now, the tone of someone who has rehearsed the sentence more than once. There's a systems integration problem this company has had for 18 months, not purely technical, organizational, the kind of problem where 3 brilliant engineers keep missing what's actually wrong because they're too close to it. She looks at him directly. You've been solving that exact kind of problem for 7 years on the 17th floor, and nobody above the 20th ever noticed. I'd like to create a role, Director of Systems Integration. 32nd floor. Not this one, so your position here stays clean of any question about how you got it. Full reporting line, full standing with the project team. She pauses. This isn't compensation for what Richard did. I want to be clear about that. I started the paperwork on this before the investigation ever began. Marcus is quiet for a moment. What changes between us if I take it, he asks. The Wednesdays. The honest kind of conversation. Does a reporting structure make that harder? Elena considers the question seriously, the way she considers things she actually cares about. It might complicate it, she admits. Then we'll have to be more deliberate, Marcus says. Can we? She asks. And there's something in the question that is about far more than an org chart. I think we can try, Marcus says. Honestly. She holds his gaze. Then yes, she says. I think we can try. Good, she says, and crosses the room, and the space between them, which has been closing slowly for months without either of them naming it, finally closes the rest of the way. It is not a decision either of them make so much as one they finally stop postponing. Dale Harmon throws Marcus a small, deeply awkward send-off on his last day on the 17th floor, a store-bought sheet cake and a card signed by the whole support team. And Dale starts a speech he clearly wrote and then abandons halfway through, settling instead for, "You're one of the best I've ever had working under me, Belle, and I should have said that a long time ago before somebody with a corner office almost cost you everything." He shakes Marcus's hand twice, like once wasn't enough to mean it, and goes to go cut the cake before the moment can get any bigger than it already is. 6 months later, Marcus Bell moves his desk to the 32nd floor into a newly created role, Director of Systems Integration, a title Elena Vance built specifically around what he had already proven he could do: sit in a room full of people talking past each other and find the exact sentence that made them start talking to each other instead. His salary moves from $21.40 an hour to $118,000 a year. He closes on a 3-bedroom house on Ashgrove Lane with a yard. In November, with the $6,200 he'd saved plus the closing help Coastal Trust included in the offer, and Zoe picks her own room and paints one wall the exact shade of blue as the lake in a photograph she has never actually seen but has heard her father describe more than once. That same winter, Marcus's mother, Carol Bell, who raised him alone in College Park after his own father left when he was 11, insists on a Sunday dinner, the kind of gentle, non-negotiable directive only a mother of a certain age can issue and expect obeyed. Carol Bell is 5'3" and has never once in her life been intimidated by anyone taller than herself, and when she opens her front door to find Elena Vance standing on the porch holding a bottle of wine and looking, for the first time in years, genuinely nervous, Carol says, "You're taller than I expected," and Elena says, "I'm sorry," and Carol says, "Don't be sorry, come in, the roast is almost done." Over dinner, Carol asks Elena what her favorite season is, whether she's ever been to Savannah, and whether she takes her coffee black. Elena says black. Carol makes her a cup with a little milk in it anyway and tells her to try it and see. Later in the car, Elena admits, quietly, that she cannot remember the last time someone asked her about her favorite season instead of her quarterly guidance. "She likes you," Marcus says. "She told me to bring you back," Elena says. "That's her version of a standing ovation," Marcus says, and Elena laughs the whole rest of the drive home. 1 year later, the Bell Vance Family Opportunity Fund launches with an initial endowment of $12 million, co-chaired by Marcus Bell and Elena Vance, providing full college scholarships to children of Vance Dynamics support staff, the exact category of employee who used to be invisible on every floor above the 20th. In its first year, the fund awards 61 scholarships, and by the end of the second year, that number climbs to 104. Carol Reyes, the woman from the fundraiser, sends her own daughter's scholarship application that spring, and Marcus approves it personally, without a single word about the gala, because some kinds of grace don't need an audience to be real. Vance Dynamics reports employee retention among support staff up 19% within 18 months of the new fund, and the internal review process Angela Brooks built afterward. specifically designed so that no complaint against a subordinate employee can ever again be filed anonymously through a shared terminal without a verified digital signature. 2 years later, Richard Sloan pleads guilty to corporate theft in Fulton County Superior Court, case number 24-CR08813, and is sentenced to 14 months, with the judge specifically citing the pattern of retaliatory harassment against a subordinate employee as an aggravating factor. He never works in executive leadership again. He is last seen, according to a single line in a regional business newsletter, managing inventory at a mid-sized logistics company outside Macon, 46 miles, and, by every measure that matters, an entire lifetime away from the 40th floor he once believed belonged to him. The acceptance letter for the Georgia Tech program arrives on a Tuesday in May, and Zoe reads it standing in the kitchen doorway, once silently and once out loud, and then looks up at Marcus with an expression he has seen exactly twice before in her life: the day she rode a bike without training wheels, and the day she beat him at chess when she was 6 and told him about it while she was still doing it. "I got in," she says. "I know, baby," Marcus says. "I watched you read it twice." "I'm going to build actual bridges," Zoe says, sitting down hard at the kitchen table, like her legs have decided the news was too big to stand through. "Real ones cars drive on." Elena, who has stopped by after work still in her blazer, sits down across from her and says, "You already have. You just haven't poured the concrete yet." Zoe considers this with the seriousness she brings to most things, and decides she likes it enough to write it down in the notebook she still carries everywhere, the same one that once held a single overheard sentence about a man named Sloan. Marcus proposes 3 weeks later, on a Friday evening at the edge of the same lake from the photograph, 4 hours north of Atlanta, having driven there with Elena on the pretense of scouting a location for the Foundation's first retreat. The water is doing exactly what it was doing in the photograph, catching the last gold light of the day, and Elena is standing at the edge of it barefoot, exactly as she was 4 years earlier, when Marcus gets down on one knee in the wet sand and asks her the same kind of honest question he's been asking her since the day her computer crashed. She says yes before he finishes the sentence, laughing the whole time, the real laugh, unguarded, and somewhere behind them, 30 feet up the shoreline, Zoe Bell is recording the entire thing on Marcus's old phone because she insisted on coming, and later that night she captions the video, simply, "two-way good," which is a phrase only the three of them will ever fully understand. Zoe Bell, now 11, is accepted into a competitive STEM enrichment program at Georgia Tech for gifted middle schoolers. The same summer, Marcus Bell and Elena Vance quietly marry in the backyard of the house on Ashgrove Lane. No press, no board members, just Marcus's mother in the front row, and Zoe standing between them, holding a bouquet. She insisted on choosing herself blue flowers, because blue felt right. At the small reception afterward, Zoe stands on a chair, taps a spoon against a glass until the yard goes quiet, and says, "I just want everyone to know I liked her before it was cool." And the whole yard laughs. The real kind, and Elena laughs hardest of all, her head tilted back, exactly like the photograph, except now nobody has to wonder where that woman went, because she is standing right here, in a backyard on Ashgrove Lane home. Angela Brooks, watching all of it unfold from the general counsel's office 2 floors below the CEO suite, tells a colleague once, off the record, that the entire case taught her something she now repeats to every new hire in the legal department. The people with the least power in a building are usually the ones with the most to lose from staying quiet, and they are almost always the ones who documented the truth carefully enough to survive being disbelieved. She keeps a printed copy of Zoe Bell's homework notebook page, the one with the doodled bridge and the single overheard sentence, framed on her office wall, not as evidence anymore, but as a reminder of exactly how a 9-year-old girl helped take down a man 12 floors above her. Marcus Bell walked into a broken room 7 years into a career nobody above the 20th floor had ever noticed, carrying a toolbox and 214.60 and a daughter who needed shoes by Friday. He did not walk out with revenge. He walked out with a family that grew instead of shrank, a record that held instead of broke, and a woman who finally let herself be exactly who she was in the photograph, laughing with her whole body unguarded, free. There is a version of this story where a man like Marcus Bell stays quiet, keeps his head down, lets the badge stay suspended, lets the loan officer's contempt become the last word. There is a version where dignity gets traded for safety because safety feels like the only thing a person like him is allowed to want. That is not the version that happened here, and it does not have to be the version that happens to you. Fatherhood, the kind Marcus Bell practices every single day, was never about winning every room he walked into. It was about staying steady enough, honest enough, and patient enough that when the truth finally had a chance to stand up on its own, it had a good man's paperwork underneath it, holding it up. What would you have done, sitting in that lobby with your daughter's hand in yours, watching a stranger search your bag for a crime you didn't commit? How much of your own dignity would you trade to keep the peace, and how much would you finally refuse to hand over? How far would you go for your family if the whole system in front of you seemed built to make you disappear quietly? And what injustice, once you finally saw it clearly, would you refuse to stay silent about, no matter what floor it happened on? If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who still believes good, quiet, overlooked people are the ones who end up changing everything. And tell us in the comments which moment hit you hardest, because we read every one of them, and stories like this one only keep reaching people because you pass them along.